I don't know if I should tell you my story of how I ended up spending a night in the cell because I got too close to the wall.
Welcome to Cold War Conversations.
This is the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Fünf, zwei, sieben, eins, sechs, sechs, neun, acht, drei.
Well, who's our first letter from today, Edward?
An old friend of yours, Doris, Brian Hartley of Thornton-le-Field, asking what's being done to build up Anglo-Soviet relations.
And I'm here to host this final program from the German Democratic Republic for you.
Welcome to episode 20 of Cold War Conversations. Today we're talking to Anke Holst, who was born in the GDR during the 1970s in Rostock on the northern coast. Anke has returned to Rostock after many years abroad and now provides tours of GDR sites in the town. Our conversation highlights how different life was in the provinces of the GDR as opposed to Berlin. In a wide-ranging, frank and honest discussion, we talk about her family life with her mother, who's a stalwart party member, Anke's school class role as an agitator, her training in Marxist-Leninism, and her weapons training in the Ernst Thälmann Pioneer Organisation in Rostock. However, before we start, I'd like to thank our latest iTunes 5-star reviewer, King Dave 82, for his very kind review. Please keep them coming. It really does help to raise the profile of the podcast. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to our running costs, head over to coldwarconversations.com and click on the orange Patreon logo. There's loads of extras you can get access to by being a Patreon of the show. That's it for housekeeping. Let's get on with the podcast. So, Anke, thank you very much for coming on Cold War Conversations. Where and when were you born? Can you tell us that?
I was born in a place called Kühlungsborn, which is a little bit half an hour to the west of Rostock, nearest big town, in 1970.
So you were a teenager when the wall opened.
Oh, yes. And I already lived in Berlin. And we left home pretty early back then. I left home at 17, started studying in Berlin, had to come back for a while, but started my first proper job 2 months before the wall came down in Berlin. So
right.
It was fun. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get on to that in a moment.
Yes. Yeah.
So what did your parents do?
My parents were both teachers. Actually, my father, when I was little, he was still in the army. And then my parents got divorced when I was about 5. So I grew up with my mom and my sister.
Right.
But both teachers.
Okay.
Professional.
Okay. And that was quite a respected position in the GDR?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Although there was not that much of a class society. I mean, it was more of a class society than they had aimed for. They kind of aimed for complete equality, of course, among all the different professions. But there still was, the kind of doctors and the kind of more respect for them. And teachers were obviously below that. But my mom was also worked herself up to a vice principal of a school and then to a school inspector as well. So I had a very hard, problems from people just not liking it.
Right.
Yes, there wasn't much love. From my experience, there really was no love between people There was not a lot of feeling of community or anything like that. There was just everybody against everyone. Yeah,
So,
very strange.
So where did you live? What sort of accommodation did you live in?
We had a flat. So when I was born, we lived in a small house in Rerik, which is a small fishing village by the Baltic Sea. We were refugees from what is now Poland. My family had to escape from that. So from the war. And so don't mention the war. I know, I'm already mentioning it. We're allowed to do that.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, so that's why we kind of had to live wherever they put us, basically. So this is where my family on my mother's side ended up, and in 1971, my mom moved, or my family we moved into one of these newly built prefab, what I like to call Plattenbau, blocks in Rostock in the northeast. So that was actually one of the first blocks that were built under the new program for, sort of very, very speedy and fast construction of living, what do you call it? Flats.
Living accommodation or flat.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, so now when I'm looking back at it, this was actually quite a historical moment. But back then, obviously, first of all, I was little, but everybody else also just experienced it as, well, this is all right, I guess, but nothing was ready. Like none of the infrastructure outside was ready. The sidewalks weren't plastered yet, and all of that. So the winters were hard when you couldn't walk anywhere with a pram and stuff. I kind of have memories of pictures of that because it was all just brand new, stomped out of the ground. Right. In an area where nobody lived before, out of like some swampy area of Russia, of Rostock.
Yeah.
And but my mom also paid 60 marks per month, I think, for a big enough flat for all of us. So
nice. What were the neighbours like in your Plattenbau?
Oh, well, it had 5 stories and 2 flats on each side, and there was all the neighbors were very normal. Thank you very much. So it was very important to be very normal and to clean the stairs when it was your turn to clean the stairs.
Yeah.
And to have there was a cleaning schedule that everybody had to stick to, and there was just no question of not sticking to it. Right. And it was all very, considering that it was one of the most sort of revolutionary states at the time. It was very normal and very pedestrian, and life was just going on for everybody. Yeah. I mean, by the time I came around in the 70s, anyways, it was conservative, very conservative.
Yeah.
When it came to everything, just everybody had to work, and everybody had to have, get married and have children, and it was all very, very normal. Of course, divorce was normal as well. So that, from that point of view, it was not as conservative as some states today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, very, very normal.
And obviously, with the childcare as well, from a very young age, you were presumably your mother was still working, and you were in childcare.
Yeah. And interestingly, now my childcare facility, the building still stands, and I've just been there recently, and there's some sort of social space for new arrivals to Rostock there. So I sometimes go there and offer my language skills to help.
Wow.
It's in the exact room where I went to kindergarten for 3 years.
Gosh, that must be weird.
Just extremely weird, I'm telling you. But yeah, it's. I mean, I actually went there. I was really like watching my emotions. Not exactly that building, because I was too little really to have any big memories of that. But just also generally the part where I grew up, and it's all mostly okay, positive, fine. you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so I cycle past there, but sometimes I don't really know any people there or have any reasons to visit or anything, but just for the fun of it.
Yeah. And how would you describe your childhood?
I mean, I was the smaller one of two sisters. My older sister, we were very different. I was kind of like the philosophical type. There were no computers around at the time, so I was reading.
Yeah.
And otherwise I would have become a geek probably. I was the only kid in school who did all the languages that we could. So I did French and English when it was time to choose.
Wow. Was English unusual as a language to study?
No, English. I mean, it was, so this is how it worked. We had 10 years of like normal school. This was 10 years. And the first 4 were like primary school. And then it started with like proper school. And at that, like, so grade 5, you started with Russian. Everybody had Russian. That was obligatory. And then from grade 7, you could choose one language. And I chose 2 because I'm crazy. So by that time, I then had Russian, French, and English.
Right.
And of course, by that time, we also still had German, the grammar and literacy lessons and all of that. And I was fine at school. I mean, it didn't trouble me. I just was quite easy for me. I think more because I was in this class with people that weren't, I don't know, that, sort of on the intellectual side. And nobody liked me for reasons, I don't know. So
do you think people didn't like you because of your mother's job? Or?
Well, it's probably a mix. I mean, my mom immediately, she was actually working at that school where I ended up going, and she immediately left for a different school because, people would hate me if she was also a teacher there. Yeah. Didn't really help much because my first class teacher for the first 4 years had the same last name as us.
Right. So they thought you were related.
We were not related, but it didn't really help. And they were like, I was also always member of the class organization. So we had about 25 kids in the class, and then we had like a leadership team of the class. And it wasn't based on sort of, I think it wasn't, I don't know, was it the democracy? I don't remember what it was based on. I don't know if we actually voted for anybody, because so there was a leader and then there were different roles to fill. Mm-hmm. And I remember taking on the role of and this is an actual word that we use, agitator. So literally the word agitator.
Right.
And I then had to stand in front of the class and give presentations on the bad things that the West had done now. And that obviously didn't make me much more popular either. And I actually went to also like voluntary education on Marxism-Leninism and all of that. I mean, as a kid, because my mom was quite enthusiastic about the whole thing, and didn't change her colors either after the reunification, because my mom was one of these people who don't just change their opinions because some state system changed.
Yeah.
So there's a word for that in German that people used to call her the rote Socke. It's like, somebody is a bit on the left side. And in any other society, that would be fine. I mean, most of the people I knew in London were a bit on the left. but with people where it's normal to immediately change your colors when, the whatever is considered good and normal in a country changes, then that kind of person gets, a bit of a bad rap. So I never, I mean, I've already obviously changed my opinions on things throughout life, but I never really could think badly about my mom for that.
Yeah. And
so,
was she a member of the party?
Of course, as a teacher, you had to be. You couldn't teach without that.
Right.
So that's why also like things like my relatives from the West weren't able to come and see us at home. They had to come to see my grandmother, and then we had to go there to see them.
Right.
So and TV, like we weren't obviously allowed to watch Western TV, and and there was never really, we never really knew how other people would find out about it, but my mom was still, and I'm not sure about this now, if she removed the button to change the channel on the TV, or if it just fell off because it was an old thing from the 50s.
Yeah.
But we basically watched Western TV by sticking our hands through the back of the old TV and changing the channel. That's on a little wheel in the back. And I still remember that feeling when you hit something and got a little bit of an electric shock there.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, fun. But yeah, so it was actually quite strict. So there were times when we just absolutely weren't allowed TV, and I had these series that I loved and really wanted to see them, but the living room was locked and stuff. It was very strict, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that you studied Marxist-Leninism. I mean, what was that? Quite, I don't know, boring, or?
I think so. Yeah. Well, the thing is, so I don't want to generalize for most people in former East Germany, but we were taught about, the system that our state was trying to build. It was still only called trying to build because we knew that we were only building this. So, where it was about people and not about, materialism, and, the people owned the means of production, and there was, no private property, and that's why all of this, the basic needs were taken care of for everybody, and sort of. But by the time that I came around, none of this was valued by anybody anymore. So it were only really the people that could understand it intellectually, like my mom, and had experienced this kind of enthusiasm and idealism of the first, the 60s and the early 70s of the kind of golden years of people actually actively working on it, wanting to improve the thing. And those people had those memories, and then but everybody else kind of hated it already, and it was just nobody cared. And I remember just things not working and nobody caring, basically. So it was just the worst way of living for everybody. It was really, but it wasn't. I don't think it was actually because the system itself was that bad. It was just not able to sort of sustain this kind of idealism of the first decades. And of course, sort of it was always these old men holding on to power for too long.
Yeah.
that was kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess people not seeing change as quickly as they'd want to see it, and
yeah, and I mean, and then sort of so living standards were actually by the 80s were quite good, and these flats that they had sort of all built like crazy fast, they were actually working for everybody. And because everything was actually quite good, and nobody really, so it wasn't basically, so it was socially completely unacceptable to be like my mom was already before the reunification. So it was actually this very strange mixture of it being the official feeling to have, but it also being by most of society just absolutely divided, but just completely despised, right?
Yeah.
This kind of idealism for that kind of ideology. So I was oblivious. I was socially completely oblivious. So I did until much later. I didn't pick up on that would make me unpopular, or I mean, I didn't care. I just did,
You just carried on.
I kind of carried on. Again, I think I kind of inherited that from my mom. This kind of idealism that, who cares what other people think? This is what I believe is right.
Yeah.
Right? So I educated myself and I went to these classes when I had the chance, and I just felt, it was a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is, for most East Germans, then, who kind of threw away that whole system for jeans and bananas, basically. Because most of them, I mean, you have to realize the majority didn't have hugely political reasons for trying to get rid of the, East Germany. They just wanted to fashionable jeans and to eat bananas all the time. So it really wasn't anything more than that. And they then had the waking up call when things actually did turn out the way that it was always described by the people who explained to us what capitalism is like. Yeah. But it was, yes. But I mean, just to sort of repeat this kind of weird feeling that we were kind of doing what was right according to official dogma, but still it was already just absolutely the wrong way to be according to what was socially acceptable. And that was just the strangest experience. Yes.
Yeah. And what was it like being in the Young Pioneers? What did you have to do there?
Everybody was in there. We were mostly just doing fun things like it's like a scouts. So we went on maneuvers in the forest and learned first aid and shooting. I was quite good at shooting.
So you had weapons training.
Guns. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but air guns. I mean, you shoot at the target, so nothing dangerous.
So it wasn't. Oh, right. Okay. Well, it's still pretty dangerous. You can still do a bit of harm with an air gun.
Yeah, but we were well trained.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it was survival skills, first aid skills. We did some exerzieren, this kind of when you parade around on the on the school grounds and learn military orders and stuff.
Right.
There was a bit of that, and and this kind of class organization that was actually part of the not of the school but of the pioneers, but because 99% of the people were in there.
Yeah.
It didn't really matter to us what was part of school and what was part of being in the pioneers. It was all, we had our I don't know if you've heard of that. Was it every morning in school? I just remember being in the schoolyard and having these appels, which is like everybody standing up and marching and standing in order, and the principal giving kind of speech, and then a flag being raised.
Right.
And I don't know how often we did that, but no, not every morning. Weird. But then, schools have their assemblies, and that's not weird.
Yeah. Training them to fire air weapons, though, is perhaps not the usual. But
people go to shooting clubs.
Yeah.
So you were more like, I was great. I was
a good
actually
shot then.
Yeah, I had never practiced, and that was the best of my year, or something ridiculous like
So you were the chief agitator and the best shot.
that. Well, only the agitator for my class,
Oh,
so
okay.
that's not any kind of big
Yeah.
position there. But my shooting results actually got a bit of attention.
Yeah. The presentations you did to your class. So you mentioned one about how terrible the West was and the dangers of that. Are there any that sort of?
They all were that.
That was the constant theme.
Well, yeah, that was obviously because that was. That was the big thing that we fought all the time. I mean, we were under a constant trade embargo, which means, that we had to somehow build cars like the Trabant that was made out of paper and low-grade cotton from the Soviet Union. And, and there was, it was the Cold War,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were made to feel that all the time. And it was, this. Have you seen this schematic of where the Western TV stations were broadcast into East Germany?
I know that you couldn't pick up the signal in Dresden.
Yeah, but that was only a small valley. So everywhere else, they were strategically placed, so you could pick them up in most of the rest of the area of East Germany.
Right.
And it was a constant assault, and it was basically, because we couldn't travel, we couldn't see the reality, so it was constantly making us sort of think that we knew the reality, but it was a kind of beautified reality that was actually created for us. It wasn't for there, It was very, very clearly created to make us think that what we had wasn't good enough and everything.
Yeah. So what did you do during your spare time when you weren't at school?
Books. I was so we were all. It was a bit Russian in the sense that we all had to do sports, and there was this very active attempt always to find the most talented kids in everything, so that because sports obviously was a very important way of presenting ourselves on the world stage. And so I was doing speed skating, and what else was I doing? I think that was the only sport I was made to do because I wasn't very good. And the other thing I was made to do is learn guitar, and I hated both. And obviously, reading.
Yeah.
And then I think we were 13 or 14 or something like that. And then we started dance classes that was organized by school, but we danced with people from different schools. So it was all chosen by height. And because I was quite tall, I got a dance partner that even taller than me. And that was great. I loved that.
Right.
And ballroom, again, this kind of weird East Germany, but also really conservative thing.
Yeah.
Ballroom dancing. This was a standard thing. Everybody, every class in the entire town would do these ballroom classes, and we had a ball in the end, and danced beautifully, and it was that I really, really loved. Just sad I'd never really continued with that. But it was one of those things. You either did judo, or you did the handball, or you did the speed skating. But the idea to continue with ballroom or anything like that just wasn't given.
Yeah. Did you have any? I mean, you said that you were unpopular, but did you have any friends at school?
Yeah, but not really any that were actually good for me. I don't know. I was actually bullied quite a lot.
Right.
So I didn't have a lot of choice.
Yeah.
And there were some other girls that there was another girl also with the same first name like me that I was hanging out with.
Right.
But not really like anybody that I could actually share any thoughts with. So not anybody was actually on my kind of had the same kind of vibe or anything like that. I never met anybody like me, even though sort of now I know there's loads of us.
Yeah.
But when I was young, no.
Yeah. Well, also, sorry, go on.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say, I guess you because of the way the society worked and nobody wants to stand out or appear different, it's very difficult
very much.
to be different, and particularly with your mother and her standing, that you were presumably expected to live to a certain standard by her and to not
yeah, I guess. I mean, it's very strange because I never I only had all the bad bits from it. I never gained anything from her standing. And later on, like in I don't know, a year or so, she said, yeah, somebody's actually said, but she's so good, shouldn't she be going to university? And I can help you and everything. And then she was like, no, she didn't want to make use of her standing or position. And so I started a thing that was absolutely wrong for me and went into vocational training to become a typesetter, and actually was just the worst at it. But yeah, that's and that in the end I never went to university, which is very strange.
Right.
Now to think about.
Okay. What was because Rostock's obviously quite away from Berlin, and you hear that in Berlin you could get almost anything, or being able to obtain things was easier in Berlin. Was it difficult to get hold of stuff in Rostock?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. You could only buy really the very basics, and there were long queues in the shops, and I think it was just a system of everybody doing favors, and it was called vitamin B for Beziehungen, like relationships. So you had to know people. And not to anything like build a house or something was pretty much impossible because you could never get everything you needed. And it only worked through if somebody could see that you would be useful for them, then they would do something for you. And and people had all their different little allotments where they grew fruits and preserved everything for the winter and stuff. So it did. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but I don't think it was great either. I mean, and the weirdest thing is that when I grew up, we still were drinking. Like, you would be better at, doing the sensible stuff and, like drinking more. Nobody drank water when I grew up. I mean, it was this. Do you remember this time when nobody drank water? Now my kid grew up drinking water and just these small things that we were just like, I don't even think there were these little habits that I now look back at and think how weird it was that we did that in East Germany. But yeah, I mean, and Berlin, for me, when I moved to Berlin at 17, it was just a big world. I mean, it was just amazing. The people just seemed so much more like mentally independent, just free to be themselves. But then, even the people that I met there, even the people from Rostock, like I had this friend that we stayed in the same room with in the hostel, and she was even sort of wearing men's trousers, and I just thought, oh my God, that is just so outrageously cool. Yeah. Because, in my part, it was just every bit of difference would have just been, would have just killed you.
Well, it's like you're saying, it was so conservative in Rostock, whereas
yeah, well, but she was only from the next part of town of Rostock.
Yeah.
So, there was really, my one was really just the worst for this. I just grew up in the absolute worst bit of Rostock for me that you can ever imagine. But yeah,
so,
Berlin was Berlin was just fantastic. And the funny thing is, I remember after 3 weeks, I came back home on the train, 3 hours on the train for the weekend, and I already spoke with the Berlin dialect, and everybody was just laughing at me for just picking that up so quickly, because I just loved everything about Berlin. And it was still only East Berlin, and for me it was just so big and so cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. People were organizing their own stuff. We went to sort of readings. We went to a U2 listening party, because obviously there were very little concerts at the time.
Yeah.
And I became part of a folk dance troupe that had a live band and was kind of doing square dance events to show people how to dance to their music and stuff. And just so many things. Everybody was an artist, and for me,
so there was almost this I don't know, much more of a creative scene.
Yes, absolutely.
And none of this was sort of like state organized, was it, or was it?
No.
This was all spontaneous.
No, you go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, did you mention a U2 listening party?
Yes, a U2 listening party, and I think it was 88, and with really good speakers, and we were all just sitting there on chairs, and I remember just totally being blown away by sort of that music.
Wow.
I mean, I was only 18. I had no.
I'm just fascinated. I mean, I think you two have done some great albums, but I think that this is the important thing to just understand, is that you couldn't just go to a record store and get a record or anything like that. The only way that you could hear some of this music was to get together with other people or buy some dodgy cassette from somebody, or actually when I was still here in Rostock, funny thing, oh my god, we weren't suffering so much from the lack of sort of LPs to buy or singles to buy or anything, because we had Western radio and we could tape our music, and we also had, actually there was something on our own youth radio station where they were playing I think 2 different whole albums at some point during the day, so you could arrange to be at home like from 3 to 4 or something, and every day it would be something else, and they were all amazing. Did I ever get, I think I definitely had a Nick Kershaw album then, and I loved Nick Kershaw, oh my god. He had great hair. I remember.
He was really, I think he still is really talented. It's just he really good musician. Anyways, but yeah, so just like Popular Idol, just playing over the radio, so you could be there and set to record, and you had your cassettes with all these cool albums.
Yeah.
So I don't know about the legality of that, but they just did that.
Well, we did similar. I mean, I remember doing that at home in London. They'd have the top 40 on, and you'd have your finger over the record button.
Exactly, right. That was the 80s, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's how I discovered Level 42 and all of those things.
Oh, you're bringing it all back to me now, because
right.
Yeah, all this 80s music.
There was some good stuff around in the 80s. It wasn't all bad. Of course, here people were all like, modern talking. And less said about that, the better. But they still love modern talking here, by the way. There's been a concert recently.
Really?
It's just like, yeah. Nothing ever moves here.
Oh.
But the worst thing, worse than the lack of LPs, was the lack of like Bravo. And you don't know Bravo. Bravo is like the forerunner of the teenage magazine with all the pictures and posters of your stars, right? That we couldn't get, and there were like some clever entrepreneurs in my class that just took photographs and sold them of these photographs and posters and stuff. And oh my god, I spent so much money on those things.
I bet those people went far when the wall came down, eh?
Probably not. No, they were slightly better entrepreneurs coming from the West. So
yeah.
I don't know. I actually have very little contact with people from my school.
So Bravo was a magazine produced in East Germany, was it?
No, that was West Germany.
Oh, it's produced in the West.
Very much West Germany.
But people sort of smuggled in copies.
And I don't know if I ever saw a proper copy. It's just really all these different photographs of bad photographs.
Yeah. And what did your relatives in the West bring you presents as well when they came?
We got things sometimes, rarely, not as often as other kids in my class, and definitely not anything that you could show other people because we were not supposed to have these contacts.
Yeah.
So that was very important. But I remember having a cool jacket once that kind of, oh my god, I remember that jacket. It was giving no warmth at all, and I run around all of New Year's Eve with it because it just looked cool, and there was just no warmth.
Well, that's what you do when you're a teenager.
Exactly. So I was kind of trying to be cool. I think by the time I was 15, I was definitely trying to fit in and be cool and stuff.
Yeah. And so were you told not to say anything to anybody else outside the family circle about the relatives in the West?
Yeah, definitely. Well, with us, it was more like being told not to do things rather than being told not to say things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There was also a relaxation of that. I think by the time it was 87, I remember my uncle did visit us, and we drove around in his Volkswagen, and I felt so weird because people could see me, and so that did happen. They're not saying stuff outside again because at home we were actually quite idealistic, and not very critical of the whole thing. So that wasn't really so much the thing for me.
Yeah. And with getting hold of clothing and stuff like that, was that again in short supply or?
Oh God, I could tell you stories of clothing. So Ian, this is the thing, right? So jeans, big story. And actually, the funny thing is, where I live now, it's only a few hundred meters away from the big, ultra-modern clothes factory that they built in the early 80s in order to deal with this, right? It was actually, for the time, it was just the most modern thing you could imagine. And they actually got in designers and did use focus group research, and nothing helped. Like, because trends that moved so quickly, that there was really nothing you could do. So they made things, and the funny thing is, because I went to school here, we also had work experience in that factory, so I knew it from the inside. We were, sort of doing things like, actually, in one work experience class, we actually were sewing little hats and caps and things. But in another class, we actually went into the factory and cut with blue threads and ironed some clothes and things like that. So we did actually properly take part in the whole production cycle, and it was massive. It was huge. And they just couldn't make it work. And then the leadership ended up buying like 2 million pairs of jeans from the West in order to just shut up the youth.
Right.
And that didn't help either. So it was really this, so I'm not just saying that people threw away everything over jeans. I mean, that really was one of the biggest things that people were unhappy about.
Yeah.
That they couldn't wear stonewashed double denim when stonewashed double denim was already out for 2 years, out of fashion at the time, right?
Yeah.
If they had traveled anywhere, they wouldn't have seen stonewashed double denim anymore. But we definitely wanted stonewashed double denim, and I almost sat next to them because it's just so ridiculous to think about it right now.
Yeah.
The way that people run. And the funny thing is, you walk around here now, people still wear double denim. And I've never seen so many people, also like women, and it's like everybody just wears jeans all the time.
Yeah.
And, so I am now also only wearing jeans because you have to adjust to the local garb, right?
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to stand out.
No, exactly. I remember when I came into my some doctor, see, I am now wearing the local garb. Everybody was laughing. Yeah, but that was the situation, and people, I guess people are just dumb. You tell them like, so look, it doesn't really matter that much. They'll just look at you. No, but we want our modern clothes.
Yeah, yeah. No. I try and tell my kids that.
Well, yeah, of course. Sort of, you want to wear something that, you want to be dressed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. If it was really that bad, that sort of, it was terrible nylon. Or the fabric that they invented actually Dederon.
Is that a special East German?
It was a special.
What was it called?
It was called Dederon, which is a kind of nylon where it is plastic. Because obviously natural fabrics were difficult and expensive to get.
Yeah.
But we had brains, so we could invent things. But Dederon, so it's DDR. Dederon is actually the name of the country.
Brilliant.
And the fact it is rather, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So if it was all just flowery Dederon dresses that they wanted you to wear, sure, I would be the first one to wear. But we did have clothes, and I did come up with things that we might like, and everybody just thought it was terribly uncool. And it wasn't working, and then we rebelled against it. Yeah. Anyway,
okay.
Kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, people are different, aren't they? I think that's the thing. So you didn't go to university. Did you want to go to university, or you decided you wanted to do something vocational?
Yeah. Well. Obviously, school wasn't great for me.
Yeah.
So I looked at the kids in the schoolyard I would have had to go to school for another 2 years, obviously, to do my Abitur, which is called here. They like A-levels or something.
Yeah.
In order to go to university later. And I was just like, nope. But if anybody had actually taken time to explain to me, so I probably would have listened. But I don't know. Nobody ever talked to each other. That was another thing. Nobody ever sat down with me and talked me through anything. I don't remember that happening until I actually went to Berlin. Again, that was the thing, that people actually talked to each other, and that was so new to me. And I remember it was actually quite an emotional experience when I had that for the first time. People actually listening to me and taking me serious, and it was just, I decided to do the vocational training.
Yeah.
Because I was tired of school, and I thought it would always be like the school I had experienced. But of course, by the time you grow older, it gets better.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go to Berlin, and your job is a typesetter.
Yes. Yeah, we did. That was a 2-year vocational training. My specialization was actually proofreading. But because everybody was sort of shoehorned into the same programs and the same, but in the first year, we actually spent most days actually spend standing 8 hours by a old typesetting case and actually putting letters together.
Yeah.
Out of metal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn it, even though it's not technically anymore in use, but you have to have this basic education so that you can understand what typography is all about. And that was absolutely crazy. I mean, that is just such a hard job. For a kid that's 17, 18. I mean, I was really struggling.
Yeah.
And not cool. And then the second year I had to come back to Rostock and work in a little cubbyhole with 5 grown-up women that all find their husbands and cars and houses the most interesting thing. And I was like, no. Oh gosh. I just wanted to go back to Berlin. I just said Rostock was the last little provincial hole, and none of these people have any idea what's really going on in the world.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, everybody who's 18 is like that, I think. And then, then it was 89, and by 89, I had a flat and a job in Berlin, and
right. So when you were in 89, you had another job as a typesetter, or was that a different job you were working?
That was at the end of my, when I had finished my education, I got a job at Berliner Zeitung, which is now, I think it's still around.
Yeah.
One of the newspapers. And that actually, the first thing that I had to do, because they didn't train us for any of the new technologies, I had just had to go into more training.
Yeah.
So we were in the first 2 months, we were still in training. And at the time, it was basically the technology for newspapers was journalists would, by that time, they would already hand in their content in typed up, but it had to be retyped. So it would work with the typesetting technology that they had back then. So that would have been my job, but I had to learn how to do that first.
Yeah. And were you conscious of any change going on?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That had already started when I had come to Berlin, and people started to go to it was called the Umweltbibliothek. So like the environmental library, but it was, everybody knew there was this underground thing of, where people would assemble and plan protests and stuff like that. And I think that was the first time I kind of consciously went, okay, yeah, this thing is really going to end soon, isn't it?
Right. And when was that? That was in 89, was it?
It was 87.
87? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Berlin was already, but it was still, Berlin was already like 100% secure. Actually, well, it's kind of hard to understand how 100% controlled and secure it was right up to the night when the wall came down. And I don't know if I should tell you my story of how I ended up spending a night in the cell because I got too close to the wall.
I think you should absolutely share that with me.
Would that be of any interest to your listeners?
I think so.
Yeah. So, so again, you I don't know. Do you actually do blog posts to your podcast episode?
Yeah. Well, we there's a Facebook discussion group where there's a load of people on there, and we discuss various topics on there. And I also put show notes for each episode on the website with various links in. So
so it will be interesting to see the schematic of the wall, because if anybody actually thinks the wall was just one wall, they would be very wrong, because it was actually like a complex of different measures of keeping, sort of people out. So the very first measure of that was on the east side, was just a series of signs about A4 in size, about on a little pole. It's about 1 meter height from the ground, but about every 20 meters or so, that, okay, now you're getting too close to the wall. Please do not walk on, but no fence or anything like that.
Yeah.
And beyond that would usually be grass or a little path or something. So it wasn't immediately visible. And so this was me in Berlin. I was usually, not usually, but I was very often just walking around on my own, because that city was just, I just found it interesting. And also I was a lot in thought, because I was this philosophical type.
Yeah.
So I was walking around. It was a summer's day in '88. And I didn't have anything on me, and I didn't have a jacket, so I didn't have pockets, so I wasn't wearing handbags yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have ID on me. And usually, I think East Germany, you always have to have ID on you, and especially when you're walking around in Berlin.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't that sort of, it wasn't absolutely like you have to. It wasn't like some kind of military dictatorship. I mean, obviously not. It's Germany. Everybody was nice and normal. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I was walking, and I overlooked one of those signs. And so I was walking just down a grassy path. And there were two burly guys coming up to the left and right of me, and grabbed me by the arms and asked for my ID.
Right. So these were plainclothes Stasi, I presume.
Plainclothes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be Stasi, actually. It could just have been border officers.
Okay.
Border guards. And so I didn't have ID on me. So I got taken to their HQ and to their station, and put in a cell. And that's how I spent a night in a cell. I spent, and the thing is, I don't remember being panicked. I think the feeling was just of, sort of having not enough agency to panic, if you see what I mean, right? Panicking would have already gotten you into more trouble than you already were. So you just kept calm. And I just asked for a little piece of paper, so I was just writing lots of, I don't remember writing. I think I wrote to some boyfriend I had at the time or something, but I had to leave that piece of paper behind.
Yeah.
So the next morning, somebody from my student accommodation came and confirmed my identity, and then I got to go home with them. And it was all a big scandal in my student hostel. And
wow.
That is the last thing I remember of it. Yeah. It was very, very strange for an experience like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you were, relatively calm about it. I mean, did they say that you were going to get released the next day, or did you not know?
No, they didn't say much at all. I mean, the thing is, I don't know where I was emotionally, anyways. But there's not much I felt anything about at the time, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I think I was very much, I mean, if I grew up now, I would be very much considered on some sort of autistic spectrum. So, I mean, that served me well in a situation like that, because I just, sure, I would just sit in my cell and write something to myself. Not a problem, sure. I don't remember lots of feelings about much things.
I take my hat off to your coolness in such a situation.
Oh gosh, I wish I could have considered myself cool back then. That would have been so nice.
I think that's pretty good. Presumably your mum got to hear about this, did she?
I don't remember that. I have no idea if anybody actually. I don't think we had talked about that.
I can imagine why you didn't talk about it, to be honest. But
I didn't feel guilty about it.
Yeah,
I didn't feel that it was my mistake. It was just the thing that happened. Not hugely scary, not hugely panicky. Just okay, this happened.
Yeah. So where were you when the wall came down?
Oh God. Okay. So I lived in Berlin, and I actually lived quite close to the wall in Friedrichshain, which is
Okay.
which is now one. It's also, but now when I look it up, it's like Friedrichshain Kreuzberg, or Kreuzberg Friedrichshain,
Yeah.
and that those two quarters are now one is just for me still the weirdest thing, because I used to be on the different sides of the wall.
Yeah.
So it was very close, and strangely, I broke my foot on the way to work a week before the 9th of November. So by the time the 9th of November came around, I was lying at home with my foot up in a cast at my mom's in Rostock.
Right.
But we were all watching that TV broadcast, obviously, the press conference with the Schabowski and the thing he said. And the weird thing is, I don't remember hearing it. I don't remember going crazy about anything in that press conference at all. But clearly everybody in Berlin went, well, we should probably check that out. Did you hear that? I don't remember any kind of from that press conference any kind of instant reaction. The reaction came the next morning when we realized what had happened overnight in Berlin.
And what was your mum's reaction to that?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I guess I must have been pretty selfish, because I just want to get better. I wanted to get better and go back
and
to
then
Berlin.
Go visit.
And I walk around West Berlin. And
because I mean, obviously everything that the way you've described of her is that everything that she'd worked for and believed in was potentially just, well, it did disappear. I guess at that point it wasn't necessarily known what was going to happen, and the German Democratic Republic might still exist in some shape or form at that point.
Well, that is theoretically what a reunification would involve, isn't it? That there would be two parties who would come together, but obviously it didn't end up being like that.
Yeah, but that wasn't necessarily an obvious. Certainly in the early weeks after the opening of the wall, it wasn't obvious that Germany would be reunified. It might mean it might mean a greater degree of democratization in East Germany. Yeah,
that's certainly what we had demonstrated for, and what people right after the fall of the wall were still speaking up for. We're still, I mean, they were sort of really good people standing up and giving really good talks. But did any of that matter later on? No. But
I think as you say, it sort of got overtaken by the bananas and the jeans.
Yeah, I think people like my mom probably saw that most of the people who immediately did travel out and did even before the war came down, did the thing over Czechoslovakia back then, and Hungary, weren't the people that you would have respected for their views, because there were genuine political grievances, obviously, with the system in East Germany.
Yeah.
But the people that did have them were about, sort of 1% of the population that did the whole, I want to travel out and stuff. Most of the people were just attracted to the better fashion and the better chocolates and the nicer things to drive and to wear and stuff.
Yeah. And when your foot got better, what were your first impressions of the West?
Oh, colorful. And again, all the people seem to be much stronger, much better at being themselves. I mean, we were raised in the belief that this was the golden, this was the golden West. This was the promised land, and everything was great there. So of course that kind of worked on you until you realize that actually West Berlin is not that much, not that, East Berlin is actually much nicer.
Yeah.
Certainly has more. It has the all the museum island and the Nikolai quarter. I don't know if you know the thing was the Nikolai quarter.
Yeah, the bit they rebuilt in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still love that place, and
yeah,
that was done with so much love and also idealism for so doing something really well and stuff. So that those things did happen in the East. It's just all sort of focused on East Berlin. So sort of.
Where did you cross? You crossed into the West the first time into West Berlin, did you?
Oh yeah, and I don't remember.
Bornholmer Strasse, or
I think it might have been that one. Just for, and then of course we also rented a hammer and a chisel, obviously to hammer out a bit of the wall. Of course, we had to do all of that. And then, and then there was already all the people standing on the side of the road and selling stones from the wall and selling sort of East German military caps and all of that. I mean, that happened like instantly.
Oh yeah.
Like whoever had money was, so it was basically gone very quickly.
Yeah.
And then we all got our 100 marks of 100 Deutschmarks rather than Westmarks.
What did you spend that on?
Oh my God, Ian, do you want to hear the sad story of what I did after the war came down?
Yes, we do.
Oh my God. So here's the thing, right? Religion in East Germany was very much just the only official religion that you were officially able to go to places, meet people that followed it and read scriptures about was the Protestant Lutheran Church.
Yeah.
And then there were some Catholic churches, but they were almost unofficially, almost didn't exist. And I kind of was interested in religion from an early age. And, it's one of these things when you don't ever get to experience it really in reality, you kind of idolize it, right?
Yeah.
So I did the terrible thing and became a Hare Krishna right after the wall came down.
That's brilliant. Nothing wrong with that.
It's not brilliant, it's terrible. I stuck around for a long time. It actually took out a big chunk of my life.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also took me away from the whole sort of complete nightmare and headache of the reunification and watching, this trauma happening.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I don't know I really don't know how conscious it was, but I really just exited society for a good few years.
Right.
After reunification and just did that thing, became a nun and ended up going to Heidelberg and to Cologne and opening a temple in Cologne.
Yeah.
And then going to Sweden and working in their publishing house. And that basically, I laid the foundation was that for that the first time I went over to West Berlin, I met a Hare Krishna on the street with books and he was selling books for very, very cheap. And because all the East Germans had never seen such beautiful, colorful, crazy books, they all bought them because they had no idea what that was. Yeah. And I looked at the guy, I was like, okay, you have a Bhagavad Gita? Yes, give it here. Where's your temple? Okay, yes, here's your flyer.
Yeah.
So 2 days later I was there, and then I was basically, that was it. I was just there.
Wow. That's really interesting because, I mean, do you think you went towards Hare Krishna because of your experiences in East Germany and you were looking for almost like a refuge or a safe haven or what?
I was really on this sort of philosophical side, right? I loved philosophy growing up. And then in Berlin I started to find books. Obviously none of this was official, so you couldn't just go into a shop and buy books about Eastern philosophy. So I slowly sort of found things that I read a little bit more about Eastern sort of mysticism. And then obviously once they got claws into me. They didn't let me go anymore.
Yeah.
Because, sort of I was selfless. I was helping out and I was giving them all my money. And basically, I spent my first 100 Deutschmarks on a sari,
right.
which again, I was such a dupe. I was just duped by them. So basically, they one of them sold me their old sari for 100 marks. Another sold me a whole set of books for about whatever else I had.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of money on those, And then obviously, once you have a pile of books, you don't really take them with you.
Yeah.
You leave them somewhere.
Yeah.
And then the president of the temple in Berlin asked me if he could put their money, their Eastmarks, on my account before the day it would all be converted one to one to proper money. So of course I said, yeah, sure, I don't care. So like they were all just using me.
So presumably you weren't in contact with your mother during this?
I was. No, we were always in contact.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So how did she sort of deal with her country disappearing? Do you know that?
It was, well, she was a teacher. She retrained actually, and then she went and studied philosophy, funnily enough, as well, in order to be able to do other things than teach German. So for a while longer, she actually tried to be a teacher, even though, once you're in your 50s, it gets to be really hard work.
Yeah.
And then she had an accident, where she fell from her bicycle because somebody else was careless and never got the proper, because obviously back then everything insurance-wise and lawyer-wise and everybody was really just trying to figure out how things work. So there was some mismanagement of her case and stuff. So she's had some proper trauma from this stuff.
Yeah.
It's been really hard, and now it was it was hard for her.
No,
It was hard for lots of people, and the strange thing is, you hear still now, like 28 years later, you hear people talking about it a lot. Like, and I sort of overhear conversations. It still is very, very present in people's minds, but it's never in the form of, what you might imagine, that somebody writes about it, or that the newspapers would have. See, everybody to the outside just pretends everything is fine.
Yeah.
And just sort of grumbles in the pub to their mates. And I think that's quite weird, for somebody like me who's, I don't know, I was lucky enough to live in London for a while and to experience people who express themselves differently, who do it, sort of more confidently and with more belief that it's worth hearing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's privilege or whatever that is, but that's something that here is kind of missing. So it's very strange.
So your mother does she still believe that the project would have worked? Or has she changed her views now, do you think?
It's impossible to talk to her about it now.
Oh, okay.
There's so much trauma that you can't even have a conversation about it.
No, I can understand that completely.
It's just sometimes, this word like the rote Socke, when she started mentioning that people call her that, I was like, what? Because, at the time I still thought that anybody would appreciate somebody who had kept their conviction, even though, sort of everything has changed. But of course I realized that, sort of most people aren't like that. So,
no.
There's still like, this, I just hear bits of it, and I just sort of build my opinions from bits that I hear in conversations that kind of at the time may not make sense to me, and then make sense to me later and stuff. And,
Okay. Anke, what was your favourite GDR TV programme?
Oh boy. Well, obviously you know this Das Sandmännchen.
Yeah.
You must have heard that from other people before.
I have. The Sandman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely, just lovely. With the stop motion animations that were really well done, and
it's probably ahead of its
so well
time.
designed. Yeah, absolutely. So well designed and just so well made.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be probably.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, DEFA did very good films, also like for like youth films. We had some like Ulrich Mühe, who was in this film that you probably know, The Lives of Others.
Yes,
he was in some very good sort of youth films like young adult films when I was a teenager. So that's where I knew him from.
Right.
Yeah, very, very good actor actually. So that was very, sort of touched me in ways that, apart from all the other ways that the lives of others touch you, that, sort of that was the added emotional thing for me as well.
Yeah. I hadn't realised that he'd been a film, maybe star in.
Oh yeah, he
in
was
the
big
GDR.
star.
Right.
Oh,
okay.
he was a big film star.
Yeah. Okay. And what was your favourite food as a child?
Oh. My grandmother was an excellent cook, and she did lots of wonderful things. And she did a milk rice that was really nice.
A what was that?
Milk rice. Like rice cooked in milk with.
We call that a rice pudding,
cinnamon.
I think. In the UK.
Rice pudding.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but we kind of ate it for a main meal, so it wasn't a dessert, but it was a main. Yeah, very strange. I think it's kind of the similar thing, but it was really like a meal.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go, tell us about your Rostock tours.
I just feel there is a lot of interest in what's left of East Germany, and I think I see it growing from my perspective. Like the longer it's been gone, the more interest there is, and obviously culture has disappeared, but the buildings and the architecture and the public art, that stuff will stick around for a while longer. And while it's still here, and while I'm in the provincial GDR, a former GDR, and actually living in one of those buildings, I just think there's enough interest for me to offer actual tours with a bit of, prefab housing with Ulrich Mühe buildings that are, these amazing shell sort of tension buildings that we have a lot of on the Baltic Sea side.
Yeah.
And with, some museums and some food and some cars and whatever else people want to see. But there is just lots of material here.
Yeah.
Sometimes the locals don't realize that this might be interesting for anybody. And I just think, well, why not? So, starting from theoretically, I mean, if anybody wanted to, I could show them around now, but I will officially sort of on internet platforms and stuff for cruise passengers. I will offer them from next year, from the start of the season in May.
Okay.
That's the pitch.
Well, no, that's great. That's great. I'm booking me flight already. No, if I had the chance to come over, I'd be fascinated, because you can tell that I'm interested in.
Of course, yeah.
In East Germany, so to have a tour from somebody with inside knowledge would be great.
Yeah. We have a Stasi museum too.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's closed right now. It's under construction, but we do have one.
Well, when it's open, let me know. Thank you, Anke.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you found that as interesting as I did. It was again great to hear from someone who'd actually been there. There's extra information in the show notes, including links to Anke's tour company. The show notes can be found at coldwarconversations.com/the word episode. and the number 20. I'd also like to thank our latest patrons who are supporting the show with monthly financial contributions. These are Russell Phillips and the Escalation 85 War Game. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
This is the Voice of America, Washington, D.C., signing off.